you could play as David Duke as a champion because we thought that would be hilarious. And we had a guy who got in character, and he was playing as a racist, so he would only attack the African American cards. I was like, I never even thought of that. I never even thought of getting. I was like, what? It's like, well, we're on the same team. He's like, yeah, but I'm racist.
Yes,
I was like, we have another card who's far right. They're trailer trash. And when you destroy the card and put them in shell because they're cooking meth, their trailer blows up and it damages everybody around. So there's we hit everybody. People who disagree with me, disagree with my perspective. We try to make a game so that we want those people to play too, because we want people to be able to disassociate with their emotions. And the thing about comedy is the reason why things are funny is because they're true. Okay. So you can kind of sneak in there and expose them to some truth. They wouldn't typically emotionally allow themselves to do it, but they can't help but laugh.
You could take a communist and have them play Monopoly and them still get a kick out of getting all the money and putting all the hotels and watching you go bankrupt, right? I mean,
the idea is to take, your people who don't think like you and expose them to ideas in a different way that they've never thought of.
All interviewers have their own style, and my style is to try to get to the point and to be intensely curious. And the key to interviewing is listening.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is the Sunday sit-down, so it is going to be a little bit more laid back, and this one's actually a really fun conversation. I think you guys will enjoy listening to it. We're going to be talking to Cameron Smith. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a military veteran. He is one of the original signers to the Declaration of Military Accountability, an opportunity for maybe a redress of grievances regarding COVID, tyranny, and all the mistakes that were made over the last few years. And it was kind of a fun sit down and I don't know, get through with a little bit of humor, fuck. It's a good opportunity to sit down and really work through some of the chaos that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years with somebody. He's a regular guy, just like me. We didn't set out here to be in a media space. I imagine he didn't set out to be a small business owner, but he runs a small business where they make a playing card game that is very, very funny. And if you saw the thumbnail, you got a pretty good sense of what that looks like. Before we get into the conversation here, which we will do forthwith, let's say thanks to the friends over at Patriot Coolers. I say they're friends. They really are. They're really great people. We saw that somebody was canceled the other day. They were not allowed to buy any more Yeti cups with the word conservative. They're a conservative women's group. And I immediately referred them over to my friends over at Patriot Coolers who reached out. Gary went out and told me he made a positive contact over there. They're going to try to set these people up. I got them on my desk every day. Look, there's going to be one that you'll see throughout the conversation. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's my coffee cup. It's 19 ounces. There's a 20-ounce coffee cup that I keep right in within arm's distance. I've got one over on our wall of sponsors that you'll see up there with the engraving done with the suspendable stuff. You guys can find them in the show description. You can find them at patriotcoolers.com. You can save 10% by using the promo code KYLE. And if you're in the market, if you're looking for a gift for somebody, if you're looking for something for yourself because it's hot outside and you want to stay hydrated, whatever. If you're looking for a new cooler, that's probably not something you do all the time, but if you want one that's going to last a lifetime, check out patriotcoolers.com. Great folks. There's a great story there. I'm trying to get the founder of the company to come on and do an interview with me as well because they're out of Houston, Texas, America. Check them out if you're in the market. Don't spend money you don't need to. Don't spend money if you can't afford it. But if you're in the business of looking for some kind of outdoor gear, or if you're looking for something to carry your hot coffee, your cold drinks, patriotcoolers.com, promo code KYLE. Save that 10%. And let's do this conversation. We're going to have fun. So my guest today is Cameron Smith. He's a man I know a little bit about. We're going to learn a lot more about him. He sent me some very funny and snarky tweets that seem to share a sense of humor. He created a card game that looks like therapy. He also has a background in the military and the Military Accountability Project, which we've had Rob Green on here and some others. So we're going to have a fun chat with an interesting guy. Cameron, welcome to the Sunday Sit Down program.
Hey, thanks. I really appreciate you having me on, Kyle. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, so
I'm looking forward to having kind of a fun chat. We've done so many heavy interviews. I think this may end up probably getting heavy since I know you've got some COVID stories. Like a lot of us, we got this trauma from government service. Why don't you start with telling people where you're from, where you grew up, and let's just get kind of the lens on how you came to make a card game that made me crack up a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm actually in Oklahoma.
Okay.
I was born and raised here. But I'm a military brat. My dad was in the Marine Corps. We fought in Desert Storm. And during that time, we moved around a lot. I've lived in North Carolina, Arizona. I lived in Okinawa, Japan as a little kid. So I got to have a really cool childhood, all that kind of stuff. My dad got out of the Marine Corps, I think in 94, something like that, right before the Mirror Building bombing. And I was in Oklahoma when that happened. I was a little kid when that happened, so I do remember that.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I was a little kid. I remember it too. That was on the anniversary of the Davidian situation, was it not?
Yeah. Yeah. The backstory, I mean, I may be incorrect, but the backstory is essentially there was a connection between the Branch Davidians, complex and fiasco with the ATF. And the ATF office that did it was at the Murrah building, and it was revenge for that. It was on the anniversary of it.
So my dad was tied into the Davidian situation. I remember sitting on the bed of a hotel, and I don't know where the heck I was. I don't remember why, but I remember seeing the bombing and watching like a third of that building fall down. And that's always really affected people in Oklahoma. What part of Oklahoma do you live in?
I live in OKC. I live in the OKC metro area.
Okay. So I went to school in Norman. I don't know if you knew that, but I went to Oklahoma for 5 years. So
I'm actually in Norman. No.
Okay, fair enough. My buddy and I sat down the other day. We were having a chat about vehicular accidents because I remember him having an accident when we were in high school together, longtime friend. Mm-hmm. And he goes, man, I had my first accident that I've had since I was in college. I go, what happened? He goes, I just rear-ended somebody. I was, I couldn't hit the brakes fast enough. And I go, oh, okay. I go, what did you run into in college? He was like, I was looking at pretty sorority girls on Lindsay Street, and I just ran into somebody's rear end back in the day.
I had a very similar thing happen to me. So when I was stationed in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, I'm a car guy. I like JDM cars. I got a Subaru WRX STI that's fully built out, E85 flex fuel, big turbo, all that fun stuff. But at the time, I didn't have it.
Yep.
And I remember I was pulling up on a stoplight that didn't usually stop, and they had a WRX on the lot, and I was looking at it, and I rear-ended a guy.
I don't know what's worse, staring at a car or staring at pretty girls. They're equally distracting for men. That's like the H's. I had an old Marine that was my my vice president when I was in high school, or he was the vice principal rather of discipline. No, he was the academic vice principal, but he did all the discipline because he was a tough guy. Classic Marine, hard nosed kind of dude. And he said it was hooch, hormones, and horsepower are the downfall of young men.
That's true. That's true.
So we just need one person in this. I've never run into anybody drunk, but that would be the third H, I think, if we could get them all done. So you left Oklahoma. It sounds like you were born there. You left Oklahoma. You traveled around with your dad, and then you ended up moving back. Is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's find out how that happened, because there's obviously a whole lot of story in between.
Yeah. So my family's weird. I got a weird story. So we did some DNA testing a couple of years ago. We found out that my grandpa, that my dad thought he was his dad, wasn't actually his father. So my grandpa, the guy who was raised by, he was Cherokee. And I was like, why do I not look like anybody? I don't even look Cherokee. What's going on? I'm like, why? And I was a kid. I used to go to powwows and stuff. And I'm like, I'm getting sunburnt everywhere. And I'm covered in sunscreen. I'm like, I don't fit in. We're not related apparently. So.
That's awesome. That's such a, they say something like 1 in 10 people are actually not, they don't have a familial relation to their father. They were raised by people, especially back in the day. That was a big thing apparently. So
yeah,
that's an interesting little.
Yeah. My dad, we actually found who his real father was. And he passed away, I think, a year prior to us finding out, but it's kind of crazy because, we actually met my aunt and uncles, and we all look like each other. Like, oh wow, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That was pretty obvious. So it's just kind of funny.
That's kind of crazy. So wait, are you on the Cherokee roll still, though?
No. So when I did the test, I came back as like, I think I have more Native American in me than Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
But
so does my desk. It's Native American wood. It's American birch, so it's more Native American than Elizabeth is.
But yeah, so anyways, my dad was in the Marines. We traveled around a lot, and then once I started school, we kind of stuck here in Oklahoma, and I went through all my schooling and stuff here. And through high school, through junior high and high school, I actually was a wrestler.
Okay.
So I wrestled for like 8 years. Was varsity all through that stuff. Cut a bunch of weight. So watching the NCAA finals the other day and see that big crowd watching, college wrestling, I was so happy to finally see some recognition for wrestlers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that normally a thing? Do people normally care about college wrestling, or was that just a unique kind of one-off?
That was kind of a one-off.
Why do you think that was, out of curiosity?
I don't know. I think sports have changed since COVID. I think all the sports that people used to care about were the ones that got locked down. People stopped caring about them, so they started looking at other stuff. Maybe, I don't know. I think that's probably why UFC is probably more popular, because there's a different stigma inside of people's heads for, kind of what's good, what's bad. But I don't know. That's just a guess.
I wonder if it has anything to do with a swing back towards masculinity, because I feel like we've seen a kind of a push where people are like, you know what? Combat sports, dudes being dudes, wrestling. That was the classic. Like Greco-Roman wrestling is thousands of years old.
Yeah, it ties us back all the way back through our history. Even if you look at so I'm a big history guy. So I've read like the Atrahasis, the Enuma Elish, the Epic of Gilgamesh. I've read all that stuff. So even if you go all the way, I've also read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, all those types. Yeah, so those things. So you go all the way back to all those ancient Sumerian lore. It even talks about those guys wrestling. So it's one of the oldest sports. So
yeah, there's even, if you go biblically, the wrestling with an angel of God, trying to figure out dominance there. It's a real human thing to do combat sports. You practice it. Even I think all primates have some version of that where they actually grapple for dominance and whatnot. So there's also some hip thrusting involved that we don't tend to do in more modern sports.
And thank God we don't. There's more clothes now. Thank God.
Yeah, no, definitely. I remember I had a professor or a teacher when I was in high school, and he just goes, if you ever seeing hip thrusts by primate animals, single digit thrusts are dominance, double digits is an attempt to procreate. And I was like, that's weird. I remember that from 25 years ago. Like the stuff that sticks with you is really weird. I can't walk away from that. Bob Lanier, that guy was a legend. All right, so keep telling me the story. We'll just get wasted. We're just gonna have this like wild sort of meandering chat about it. I promised you a meandering chat, so that's what we're gonna do.
That's all right. Yeah. So where was it? Okay. So so went and wrestled. I thought about wrestling in college. I was 5A in Oklahoma. All the guys that I wrestled with were all top 10 dudes. Mm-hmm. I just, I got burnt out from cut weight, man. And so
that looks awful for whatever it's worth. From the outside, as a never doing that, it looks like a terrible thing to do to your body, and it looks exhausting.
Oh yeah. So as an example, my senior year I didn't really cut that much. I'm kind of a smaller guy. My senior year I wrestled at 130, but my freshman year I wrestled at 103, and I was cutting down from 116. I would cut down from 116 to 103 in 5 days.
That's like a jockey weight.
Yeah, and you have crazy cardio, and crazy. Like when I was I think my junior year, I wrestled at 119. I was benching 225, squatting 275.
That's freakish. And you're what, 17 years old there you're talking about?
I think I was 16 when I was in Afghanistan, and we were working out every day. I was in the 5x5 workout plan.
Yep.
And I was doing 5 sets of 5 with 285. And I weighed 145 pounds.
That is, that's gross. I kind of hate that about you now. I don't think I've ever been able to do that. I was never a bench guy.
The push-up, I love the PT test because I got short arms. So the push-ups, I'm just like, no, I could max the push-ups in a minute.
Yeah, no, I do. I experienced that. I just can't do the big weight. I can do body weight stuff all day long. I love that. So did you go, okay, so high school, you're doing that, you're doing sports, obviously an athletic guy and pugilistic. So was the military a lineup for you, or was that something you?
Yeah. So I was really into church at the time and stuff. And I used to be a worship leader. I used to write music and do all that fun stuff I was actually raised Catholic, and then I decided to go Protestant after all the Catholic abuse stuff started coming out.
Yeah. Any particular flavor of Protestant?
Man, I've dabbled in all of them. I kind of started off as Baptist just because that's what's around.
That was going to be my guess, by the way. Just it's just a thing.
When I was a kid, I went to Falls Creek, so that kind of stuff. And then as I got a little bit older, I went and did some Protestant stuff too. So now I'm kind of I don't know. I'm weird. I consider myself somewhat of a ancient astronaut theorist with some Gnostic leanings, but I still believe in Jesus. So I got
Who may or may not have been an ancient astronaut? Is that?
yeah, who may or may not have been an ancient astronaut. I don't know what happened over 10,000 years ago. There's no like after COVID and the brainwashing and being exposed to all that stuff. It's like, how far back does do the lies go? How far back does the crazy go? And
How far deep do the things go with the Pyramid of Giza? Are you watching that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. As soon as I see that, I'm at work, I'm talking to friends, like, let me get my ancient astronaut hair all messed up. And so like, I told you.
I need to put on my tinfoil hat that's shaped just oddly enough like a pyramid.
It's freaking laser beams and UFOs. Okay.
Wouldn't it be wild if that ended up being the case? If we go back and you're like, the Stargate, my buddies and I were talking about this same conversation about running into girls on Lindsay Street. He's like, man, there was a movie about that. I go, yeah, Stargate. One of the great Kurt Russell films of all time, maybe.
There's a conspiracy theory that the Stargate original series is actually a true story that they hid in the series.
Nice. So, I told my buddy yesterday that it was actually a documentary. I just
a documentary. Yeah,
I was like, it's just a documentary. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, I mean, they reenacted some parts with Kurt Russell, but obviously,
for sure,
clearly is what happened.
But the P90s were there.
Yes. Well, Kurt Russell has a kind of a history of showing up with different weapons that are like fake space age looking stuff. So the P90, I think, is a dumb gun just because I don't like the way it looks. And if you remember, if you go back to Escape from New York and Escape from LA, they were carrying AR-15s with a 20-inch barrel, but with no handguards on them. They pulled it at the Delta Ring, so you've got an exposed gas tube and an exposed barrel. It looks like a really good way to get like a third-degree burn.
You gotta hold it on magnum.
I suppose that's what you're doing. Hey, listen, people used to teach that too, so tactics have changed. Okay, so you've got some wild religious leanings that have gone into the deep.
My religious leanings have gone awry. Okay.
Sure. We're gonna bring you back. We're gonna lure you back in. That's just what has to happen. Get you back.
So I definitely believe in Jesus. I believe in all that stuff. My issue is with the Old Testament. New Testament, not so much. Old Testament, I'm like, I don't know. So
okay. But context is key there. It's meant for certain people at a certain time, and then we extrapolate, right? Okay.
Yep. Yep. So I guess we'll just move forward. So. 2008, I joined the Army. After I graduated from high school in 2007, 2008, I joined the Army. And I actually joined the National Guard. And my dad was the Marine, so I'm the disappointment in the family because I didn't.
I was
going to
say Corps. That's an ugly uniform comparatively. How'd you make that decision? What was the recruiter office look like?
Well, so I was working. So I was actually going to college at the time for computer science, and I'm an IT guy by trade. So. Go to college for computer science, and I was working at Seagate Technology doing tech support. And I was like, I hate working in the office, so let me go see if I can find like a military job that I can get away from work and they can't fire me for it. So I decided to go reserves just so I could take a break.
Yeah.
And 9/11 happened, and I remember when all that stuff happened, so that was kind of very impactful. I remember all those things. My stepbrother, he had previously just went active duty a year prior to that, and he went Army infantry. He was deployed to Iraq in 2009. So, but right around that same time, I was like, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to go in the military. I went and started talking to the Marine Reserves and the Army Guard. The Army Guard offered me a TSSCI with a CI poly and a 20K bonus. And an intel job, and the Marines offered me a secret clearance and no bonus. And I was like, well,
they probably promised to kick you in the dick though. So there's that.
Yeah. So I was like, I guess I'm in the Army now. So went and did that. And the school I went to, I actually came in as an intelligence. I did intelligence and electronic warfare. So essentially, I was the S6 guy for all the S2 guys, if you know what that is.
Mm-hmm. You want to explain that for people that don't know what that is? Sometimes when I feel like when we speak in code, people just go like, I have to tune out now. There's too many acronyms. So let's break down acronyms for them.
Yeah. So essentially I ran all the digital communication systems and the IT infrastructure for all the intelligence operations for like Kubernetes development. Mm-hmm. So that includes SATCOM, IT systems, Linux networking, crypto, designing, constructing SCIFs, SAPFs. I also picked up a second MOS. I worked on drones.
Okay.
And let's see what else.
None of this stuff sounds like a card game yet, but I'm excited to find out how it plays into it because we're all
Well,
end up being a cumulative sort of experience at some point. We all dump into something that makes sense in the end.
yeah. So I did so my first AIT was 47 weeks,
Okay.
which is quite a decent sized school. And then I immediately went to a second school for working on the drone stuff for another 21 weeks. So I did all that. Came back.
And where'd you
like
go for those? What geographic areas?
I was in Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
Arizona. Okay.
Yeah. Right next to the Mexican border. It's like 5 miles away from the border.
Yeah. How is Fort Huachuca? I've only heard of it. I haven't been.
So I love it. A lot of people don't, but I love the climate because you're like at 6,000 feet up and it's a dry heat. Everyone's like, a dry heat? Ugh. It's actually nice. Tucson is like 10 degrees hotter than Sierra Vista typically is. And I mean, like during November, we could go out and swim. And
yeah. And Sierra Vista has it has a river that runs by it, does it not?
Yes, it's to the east of it. Yeah, it's right outside of town. They also have public shooting ranges out there that are free. You can go check out. Yeah,
isn't that wild? When you get a little bit further west than say Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, you start finding out that people believe in public lands where you can just go do stuff.
You're like, what do you mean? You mean who do I pay? There's things to do outside? What?
Yeah, you could just camp on the ground somewhere and, like you don't have to pay someone to camp on the ground. You just go and throw your tent up and decide that's where you're going to stay the night, and you do. And people do it all the time.
Yeah, it's weird.
I mean, what's funny is that we get if you see people in the Northwest, sorry, if you see people in the Northeast and even on the Eastern Seaboard, you said you spent some time in North Carolina, that's completely foreign to them. That America would equal, like, there are lands that are the public lands. That's why when we see these public land debates that are going on right now and people are talking about, oh, we need to sell them off. And people are like, yeah, the government shouldn't own land. You're like, wait. We all own that land. That's our land. You can do cool stuff like go shoot there.
Yeah. Or hike or camp or hunt or, go check out the wilderness and go fish and take your kids out and do amazing and make memories.
Yeah.
And those types of things. So
it is. It's a different world. Anyway, that's an advertisement for travel around America. If you haven't seen some America, we got a lot of it. There's some cool places. Yeah. That's the upside of being, I guess, in the military or being a military brat. At least you see these different spots. What was Huachuca was both trainings or was the drone somewhere else?
Both.
Okay. So you spent some pretty good time in Arizona. You worked on your tan and or got burned, and then
I just freckled.
Just freckled.
Just freckled and burned. That's it. So was in Huachuca. Came back and got a job working for the Defense Information Systems Agency as a system admin, working on IT systems for them. Mm-hmm. And then I got the call to deploy to Afghanistan. And so I deployed to Afghanistan and with the 45th Brigade combat team in 2011.
Okay.
And was in country for a little over 9 months. Saw combat. I did a couple different things when I was there. I was in JBAD, I was in Bagram, and I was in a little place called Kalagoosh. This flag right behind me, I actually brought back from the Tilda Field House.
Nice.
So, yeah. So in Bagram. It's not there anymore, I guess. I don't know what happened to it. But
right. So, yeah. We completely surrendered that one.
Yeah. So I was there when I was in country. We did ISR missions for drones. So I was a crew chief. We were launching and recovering all these RQ-7B shadow drones. We were like, it just does ISR type stuff.
So you're
intelligence, surveillance, and
reconnaissance type
stuff. Yeah. And
ISR is one of those ones that has kind of snuck into the lexicon for a lot of regular people, I think, too. But
yeah. So did some of that stuff, and then I got pulled off to do some SIGINT work in Kalagoosh, and that was actually really cool to be able to do some of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Came back and started working at DISA as a GS employee on their Defense Enterprise Email Program, which was like the largest exchange environment in the world. It was like close to 2 million mailboxes.
Whoa.
So pretty large. And I was on their identity team, helping them automate stuff, and worked there for a little bit. Then I got picked up by Microsoft. So I went and worked at Microsoft as a cloud engineer for about 2 years. And then I didn't really like the culture, didn't really fit me. And so
what is that culture for people that haven't worked in that kind of IT space?
big tech culture. You know, it was a lot of the type of stuff that you kind of heard about, you know, like at Google, like the woke culture was kind of there. So like my mindset and my values didn't really mesh with their mindset and their values. And I just wanted to find a place that I felt like I fit in. And
Did that mean when you were at Microsoft that were you doing self-censorship where you wouldn't speak around your colleagues? Is that pretty common?
Yeah.
You just kind of know from who you're talking to. Where was that physically located, by the way? Was it still
so there was so I worked remote there. The physical location was down in Las Colinas, Texas, but you know, we had issues to where like we'd have new people get hired like at a female boss, which isn't an issue. I don't really care. You know, I worked for females that were actually one of my best bosses I ever had was a female.
I do. I don't want female bosses. I'll say it if you won't.
But you know, the thing that I thought was kind of weird was they had like this little clique going, and they would only promote their friends that were other females, even though we'd been there longer, and you know, our stats were higher and stuff. And on meetings, they would bring in stuff that wasn't appropriate. That you know, I couldn't say stuff like they were talking about how their personal friends, you know, is transitioning, and we need to all celebrate them, and we need to talk about it on this work. And I was like, how is this relevant to this job? You know, like I think that's, you know, I'm not going to participate in that stuff. So
that is I mean, that's pretty wildly different than being in a DoD environment or being in
it used to be.
Yeah, probably true. Okay. When did you so the card game, which I've alluded to a few times, you've showed me a couple of cards. It involves a deep understanding and sort of humorous take on a lot of the major cultural events that we talk about. So you've got give me an example, the Bernie Sanders card. What's it called?
Senator Sanders. I don't have a physical one of the Bernie Sanders card.
I just remember it said it was like level the playing field or something.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Let me pull up another one. I got a couple of them. Here's one that's relevant. So here is Justice Sotomayor. You can kind of see her.
Okay.
So it's relevant to the judicial issues going on right now. Here's another one. We have an FBI agent, and they have a special ability called FISA application.
Right.
You know, and it says special ability says submit a doctored and fabricated dossier to conduct espionage operations against your political enemies.
So this is yeah, but what I'm getting at is that there's a kind of a high level of sophistication when it comes to you're aware of a lot of things that are going on. You have a snarky take on there, which suits, you know, the audience that I think listens to me. They have I have the same attitude. You take it like kind of in a humorous way, but it's also pretty dark. But you had that going to Microsoft. Did you have it then, or was it developed after the fact? In other words, did you think this way then?
You know, so
or did they make you think that way? Did they forge you into this person?
So when I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh with my dad.
Okay.
You know, my dad has a big influence on me. My grandfather was a big influence on me. We're gun nuts. My dad was the largest Class 3 dealer in the state of Oklahoma in the 90s for about 10 years. So I grew up shooting Tommy guns and machine guns and NFA stuff out the wazoo. We had a Ma Deuce in our living room. We had like 20 Uzis in our garage. Yeah.
So some people tell me that they're a gun nut, and then they go and tell me something that is not impressive. And then some people tell me the thing that you just said, and I'm like, that's what a gun nut means in my world.
Yeah, we never had ammo. We shot it all because they all had machine guns. You know?
Right. I just had an offer reached out from one of the national gun organizations, and they said, hey, we love what you're doing. And by the way, if you ever want to come shoot belt feds with us, let us know. And I'm like, that's a good offer. Like, I'm into that.
Are you paying for the ammo or mine?
I think they are. I think they can write that thing off. I think we'll probably do a promotion, little shoot there. But that being said, there's gun nuts that people in the let's say the Microsoft world, your normies that are out there call gun nuts, and then there's the real gun nuts. I don't consider myself a real gun nut, not to people that have 20 Uzis in their garage.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but my dad's not in the business anymore. The only NFA stuff I still have now is like super cans and stuff like that. But
those are the only ones you need. That's the only ones anyone can afford to shoot, right?
Yeah, they're more fun. I like suppressed 22s. They're my favorite. Sure.
All right, so there's our common ground. If I had to choose one gun, it's suppressed 22 something. I'm not sure which.
You get a suppressed 22, you can get any gun you need.
This is also my argument, and I can carry 10,000 rounds on my back without breaking myself. Name another caliber you can do that.
5.7. I carry a suppressed 5.7 on me for my UDC.
Those are starting to get cheaper too, are they not? The ammo is actually cheaper.
Yeah, I got a PSA Rock with a Silencer Coast Sparrow.
Okay.
That I carry with a red dot on it and a light, and I can literally carry that puppy inside the waistband with the suppressor, stick it down my leg, and it's comfy. It's super comfy, and no one knows it because it's ridiculous. I pull it out, and it's like a Dirty Harry gun.
Yeah.
You know?
You got an extra 7 inches of draw, but your ears thank you later.
Yeah, it's got like 24 rounds. It doesn't kick at all. Within like 20 feet, you don't even hear the supersonic crack. It's like, it's legit.
I don't hate that at all. I've always been kind of on the fence with 5.7. For folks that don't understand, 5.7 is a rifle caliber-ish. It's like a mid-rifle pistol caliber, and you can get them in rifles and carbines, and you can get them in bullpups, and you can get them in handguns. And we're starting to see them pop into handguns more and more. I keep seeing weird people doing weird things with them. They
like
haven't
carrying
quite
an AR-15 in your pocket.
Yeah, they're not. They haven't converted me there yet, but I've watched them for a long time with like, some interest. A suppressed one that may be interesting for a handgun. All right, well that's another day. What happens when you hit something with it? You ever hit like a raccoon or something with a
Shot a mouse with it. Shot a mouse with it the other day.
A mouse?
Yes. I was putting him out of his misery. He was stuck in a glue trap. You know, I'm like,
How
I'm
big
sorry.
is this mouse?
I'm like, hey man, you're gonna get hit with a varmint round. You know, good day.
That sounds destructive to a mouse.
You know, it was a varmint. You know,
Let's go back to our Old Testament. Man has dominion over the mouse in the glue trap. So
Yeah,
be it. You're being good.
He's allowed to
steward.
live, just not in my garage of my race cars. Okay,
That's the rule. That is the rule. Yeah, they might munch on your wires or something too. I imagine.
Yeah.
All right. So you grew up with guns, real gun nuts, not fake gun nuts. I like this. And you grew up. You said that changed your sort of cultural influences. You think that Rush Limbaugh, guns, military,
Going to gun shows every weekend, selling guns. I was selling guns when I was a kid at gun shows with my dad.
Got it. And there's a specific type of people that used to. I actually attended some gun shows in the Midwest back probably about the same time, and it was different than it is today. Now it's more like people doing flea market stuff. I feel like you could actually buy guns there. So then you go and you deal with like woke Las Colinas, Irving, Texas gals who are talking about celebrating transition. What year is that when that's going on?
2015.
2015. Okay. Where were you on Donald Trump when he first announced?
Well,
if you remember.
I do remember. So it's kind of funny. So the first time around, I was an independent, and I was thinking, and this is kind of where it started. It was like strategizing. I'm like, in Oklahoma, it doesn't really matter if I vote Republican on the main ticket because it always goes red. And I was like, so how can I make my vote actually matter? It only matters in the primaries, but I like both conservative candidates. So I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to register as a Democrat and be a dino. And I voted for Bernie Sanders so I could vote against Hillary Clinton the first time. And then on the general election, I voted for Trump against Hillary. So I voted against Hillary twice. Then I went back to, so I actually stayed registered as a Democrat for years just to screw with people.
Yeah, because you can announce that as an authority, like as a registered Democrat. Here's what
I'm a Democrat. It's like I would mess with people. I was like, I don't believe people should have the right to own guns, and I would just mess with them, and they'd get all mad.
This is where the humor comes in. This is the trolling nature. This makes sense to me. I understand this humor. I understand where that comes from. All right. So 2015, you end up voting for Trump, and you didn't stay at Microsoft, obviously, at that point. When you leave? What year did you leave?
So it was 2016, I believe, is when I left. Or was it? Yeah, 20. I was like, I'm trying to think. It was like, I think it was 2016.
Okay,
that's when I left, and I was looking for a job that actually fit my culture a little bit better, and I found a really cool gig doing some stuff with the Air Force, doing some IT systems for a new program that they're doing that I can't really talk about. But
sure, was this out of Tinker, at least geographically? Okay.
Yeah. And some of the stuff that I was involved in at a high level is SCIF and SAP construction, data center design, so pretty high level technical type stuff. And right around the same time, I was still in the Guard, and I decided to go ahead. And so I was a sergeant at the time, and I just missed getting promoted to staff sergeant by a week for time and grade. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna drop a warrant packet. So dropped a warrant officer packet, and went through all the process, went to the board, made it through, and then I got a slot to go to Fort Rucker, and went and trained quite a bit to get in shape and ready to go to Fort Rucker and all that fun stuff. And then went through walks, and came out as a W01, went back to my unit, and I was the guy that was in charge of running all the intelligence systems for the state of Oklahoma from 2016 to 2020. Almost 2022.
So the last sit down we did, we had a Green Beret on. I had him walk through a lot of the training and what it means, because I think a lot of people don't understand military culture from the outside, and sometimes I like to do a lens to that. Will you talk about the warrant officer, sort of that in between space that it occupies, and what it means for people that don't know it when they see that CWO rank, what that means from the outside if they're a non-military person?
Sure. So there's a couple of different flavors of warrant officers. You have flight warrants and you have tech warrants. I was a tech warrant. So flight warrants can come off the street, or they can come from either lower enlisted that's already in that wants to be a warrant, or they could become from an O grade, like a traditional officer who doesn't want to move into a managerial role but wants to stay technical. So some of the main differences between like a regular officer and a warrant is a regular officer is not specialized. So you'll have what they're branched. So you have an infantry officer, and they're in charge of pretty much everything within infantry, or an intelligence officer. They have to know essentially they're all source. You know, they're not going to specialize in QMIT. They're not going to specialize in SIGINT. They're going to specialize in, hey, I know how to run a company or a platoon of intel guys, and I know how to present this to a boss. I can steal your PowerPoint slides and then talk to them with some authority, you know, right, for some extent. and so that's kind of how those guys operate. You kind of think about them as supervisors. And when you think of a warrant, to become a warrant, you have to typically be an NCO for several years, be really good on your PT scores, be a good leader, have 3 good NCOERs. They want you to have a deployment under you. And I went to warrant officer candidate school when I was 25, so I was pretty young going. And there was nobody who'd ever filled that slot in that state ever. And
interesting.
I saw it. There was only so the position that I was in, I was a 353 Tango, which is intelligence and electronic warfare chief warrant officer. And I think at the time when I got out, there was only 52 of them in the entire Army.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty rare.
Pretty small guys. And so, like in order to get that, you have to be a subject matter expert in your field. Your job is essentially to advise commanders. And you stay within your specialized skills through your entire, period of W1 to CW5. Now, CW5, they're not really as in the weeds as much anymore because they're kind of equivalent to like a colonel. But like a CW2, CW3, those guys are really in there.
So they're technical subject matter specialists and
within a specific field, yeah. And they advise commanders.
I was Air Force time, my Air Force time, we didn't have warrants. It's not a thing. They should. There's a couple places where it would make a lot of sense, particularly when you have like enlisted air traffic controllers telling like full bird colonels like whether or not they can land and what to do and giving them commands, which are legally binding, and it doesn't make any bit of sense. But if you had that kind of trade-off,
the authority helps.
Yeah, and it should. So that's kind of the thing I wanted to get in there. People are familiar with the enlisted ranks. You start off eating dirt, and then at some point in time, you get to tell other people to eat dirt. And then you've got the officers, and they get lost, and they know some things. But if they don't have a good NCO core that's keeping them in line, they probably won't make it into the senior ranks. But at some point in time, they make big decisions. The CWO ranks, your warrant officers, your chief warrants and stuff, they sit outside of that. And they kind of walk in both worlds, it seems like. They're one of the few places where you can really put 2 feet in the ground. Do you get saluted as a warrant? So you get the customs and courtesies that go along with being an officer, and yet at the same time, you kind of have that sort of ground level respect that you get from being a senior NCO. So it's kind of an interesting space. I think it's an important space that we don't have in the Air Force, that we didn't have at least. They should. Yeah,
very, very useful. It was useful during COVID too, because. And I'll get to that in a minute.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's what that is. There is another caveat. The flight warrants are brought in, and a lot of guys who are pilots like to go warrant because after they hit, as soon as they start hitting major, they stop flying. They lose a lot of the flight hours. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of O grades will actually switch to warrant, and they take a little bit less pay, but they get to fly for the rest of their career. So.
It's like a semi-lateral, but it's deciding what your career path is going to be. You get to decide what your next 10 years are going to look like instead of doing the other.
Yeah, and you get more respect as a warrant than you do as an O grade too. So
you're
like the mascot of the Army,
right?
You're like it's the ultimate sham shield.
It's just such a neat, it's a neat space. And if I had known that was a thing, and I know that the Air Force didn't do it, I might have made some different decisions. At some point in time, the Air Force should catch up and get the warrant game done, because It is. It's a superpower, and it's universally, like, it doesn't matter where you go and you hear about it, you're like, I get it. Yeah, that's what you need to have. We should have done that. Okay,
Yeah,
fair
you
enough.
can get away with more stuff. I was able to like when I would go to NTC and stuff, like guys couldn't take stuff. When I would go to NTC, I had a snow cone machine in the back of my truck. I had a
What is
washer and
NTC?
dryer. National Training Center. It's where we do like our big army stuff, where we
Okay.
have entire brigade size elements that are fighting other fake armies, and we're out in the desert for 6 weeks. So I'm able to get away with stuff and bring stuff in to help my Joes to make their lives a little bit better, and they're happy, then they're going to work harder. So,
Yeah, you get kind of the you get the BS shield, but you're not necessarily. Yeah, I like all of it. All of it is having somebody. It's kind of like what the Air Force does it with the first sergeant kind of thing. The first sergeant is the closest thing we have to real warrants. I know you guys have the same kind of deal, but someone whose job is to look out for the guys that are below them. That's literally what they're supposed to be doing, and has a technical expertise, at least in the area they're serving in hopes. And met some really cool first, some shirts in the Air Force base, and most of the warrants I met tend to be like humble, capable, a little bit less serious about themselves, but knew what the mission was about. So that's, it's good. I just want to give that insight for folks that had never heard it, because they probably hear these things every once in a while, look at it, and rank doesn't mean anything to them. Like when I look at Navy rank, do you understand Navy rank, by the way?
no.
Like, what does 3 eagles with a squiggly line and a triangle mean? Do you have any idea what that, like, why is there
a bird? Is everyone a colonel?
Everyone is a bird. Yeah,
everyone's a colonel.
And what I also figured out too, and I still don't understand this. You ask somebody like, "Hey, what's your rank?" and they tell you what their job is. They're like, "Oh, like I'm a machinist mate 3rd class," and I'm like, "Well, that sounds like a rank." And they're like, "Oh yeah, it's a rank and your job at the same time." Like, why? Why don't you just have rank, dude? Like, what's your pay grade? Now I have to ask what your pay grade is. Do I salute you or not? What does it mean when there are 3 anchors and a bird and some sort of shape? Like, I just want to know.
And how does semen fit into this? What's going on?
Yeah, why did you guys choose that? There's something wrong there. Love the Navy, Air Force of the ocean, but still very confusing to everybody who's not in the Navy.
Yeah,
even the Marine Corps figured it out. The Marine Corps figured out real rank too. Have you noticed?
Yeah, they were like, no, we're gonna go with the Army style.
Right. They looked over and they're like, I'm pretty sure like whatever's going on over there is kind of gay. So we're going to not do that. We're going to do Army, but harder.
Yeah.
It's gotta be. Okay. So you took on this, you said it was the chief of the entire state of Oklahoma for the National Guard guys there. Is that what your role was for?
No, I was running all the intelligence systems.
Intelligence system. Okay.
Yeah. So, but essentially, so that's what I was doing. And then in my civilian capacity, I was working for the Air Force. So I eventually made a GS-13.
Okay.
Doing stuff with them. I was an IT lead doing things with them. And then what kind of happened is, the 2020 happened. I was a Trump supporter. I was like, the lawfare's getting crazy. Like, I was like, this is nuts. What's going on? Like, why are they doing this? Why are they operating this way? This isn't what the way the system's supposed to work. This isn't how it was described to me. like, oh, there's special rules for these people. And there's different rules for us. Oh, okay. Now we can see it. So and I'm starting to realize like, oh, this is just a sick joke with their, we're just like, what is this?
We're talking about specifically sort of the summer of love stuff. Or you're talking about the COVID lockdown. Kind of walk me through the year, because I recall that year and I spent a lot of time dwelling on it. I wonder if you have too. Maybe start like in February when we started hearing about things before. Because I don't know what Oklahoma looked out like for lockdowns. I saw New Mexico. I saw some other states. I never saw Oklahoma.
So where I was at, I was in Norman, so I was in a little different place. Norman is like liberal. It's like,
it is.
It's the more liberal side of Oklahoma. And during the George Floyd riots, we had small little instantiations of it here. We actually had a city council here that defunded the police department.
Oh, good. That seems good in a college town.
And then there was a big movement that I kind of hopped on to kind of help with, push back against the defunded police stuff going on. And I was knocking doors, trying to get stuff signed to get the mayor recalled and the city council members recalled and all that stuff. And we actually were successful with getting, I think, 3 city council members either removed or run out by getting your opponents elected. And then we got the mayor. We got a new mayor in there. So that was actually kind of cool. We made a lot of connections and stuff like that. But I was like, this this country's going south. I'm a history guy, so I'm like, where in history is this similar? Like, where can I find any parallels? So I started doing a ton of reading, and I started getting really interested in the Spanish Civil War. And I don't know if you know much about the Spanish Civil War, but I've read a ton of books about it.
I know a very, very little bit. I know a cursory amount, so I will be enough to know that some of the names you mentioned will be familiar. But go ahead and say the parallels, because I'm curious.
So if you ever get a chance to read any books about it, I highly recommend The Battle for Spain. I can't recall the author from the time who wrote it, but essentially it's, communist forces versus nationalist forces that, have the backing of the Catholic Church. Very similar to our dichotomy right now. There was essentially, the guys who were in charge of the government. There was like a socialist / communist side that was called the Republican side, oddly enough. And then there was the nationalist side, which was essentially they were just pushovers. They were kind of like the conservatives in our party, where they're not really conservative. They're actually part of the deep state, and for Spain at that time. And they started killing people in churches and having riots and digging up graves of people, which sounds oddly familiar, and desecrating their dead bodies, and they took control of the government. They let a lot of their political prisoners out, and there was a coup essentially inside the military, where Franco had forces essentially in North Africa, and he borrowed some Junker-52 airplanes from the Nazi regime at the time to help them transport soldiers from Africa to Spain. And they pretty much just went in and started, taking over certain areas, and they wouldn't recognize the government, and that's what it turned into. So it's very complex. I'm not assigning blame to any side. It's super complex at the time. Everybody did bad things. So, but that's what happened. And so I just felt like it was good.
Yeah. What specifically made you kind of key into that? Because there's other historical analogs that people have cited. This is maybe the first one I've heard about this particular space, and particularly in Spain.
Yeah. So the thing about Spain, it was a civil war. It was civilian versus civilian.
Okay.
And it was partisan, like it is today. And they, there's stories of them like going and eating breakfast and then going out after breakfast to go fight on some front line. And they would have like their political enemies or their neighbors, like literally their neighbors who were a different political party, lined up, and they would shoot them. And then people would be eating ice cream and watching. Like it's like the summer of love turned up to 11 type stuff.
Which is, when you think back about what happened in the American Civil War as well, and they thought it was going to be one thing, and people would commute out to go watch the battles. You hear stories about that. That happened. I used to live all over those battlefields in outside of DC. Battles of Bull Run and so on, where people commuted and they set up their parasols and they're hanging out. They've brought vendors so they could watch the Union Army route, and they got their butts kicked, obviously. And so it's weird. It's really weird to hear like casually commuting to war in your own community. And it did seem like we were getting real close to that. So that's what you were seeing. It sounds like when you saw that as a potential future.
As a parallel. As a parallel. Like some of the other stuff that they did is some of the things that they fought over were so if you remember when people used to have telephones, they had switchboards, right? And so that was actually a manual process to connect calls. So one of the things that they used to do is controlling the switchboards was a key battleground space in order for them to control the flow of information. Okay. And so what they would do is the people who would listen to us were also listening in the phone calls. That's how they could listen to the calls. And so if you didn't want your people to talk, you wouldn't connect the calls. And so they would actually have fights over who controlled the switchboards. There was a lot of battles just over that. That kind of reminded me very similar to the types of battles we had on who controls social media. It's the same thing. It's just taken up, to a modern version of it. And so it's the distribution of information and information flow, and was what they were fighting over. So very similar type of stuff. Now they were just fighting with real guns. So
all right, we're going to cut away for just a second. Say thanks to the folks over at Patriot Coolers. Again, they are the longest serving sponsor, the longest serving, I say, because they actually have been serving us up with both fantastic products. They've been taking care of you all. They've got great customer service as well. It's patriotcoolers.com. Look in the show description if you want to see the so-called Kyle Seraphin Show collection. What that really means is the Suspendables collection. It's got Suspendables branded merch. All of the logos created by Garrett O'Boyle. They They did a great job of etching them on. I've seen their laser etching process. I'm going to get some B-roll from them too, because it's just really neat looking, knowing that they're made. They ship them in from China the way that everybody else does when it comes to these rotomolded tumblers or coolers, whatever. But then you end up getting the personal touches put on in Houston, Texas, America, which is a cool thing. They're an American company, so those are the people that are making the money on it. And they support veterans like you probably do as well. These are... they're an outstanding product that goes out there and they actually live the values. Like I said, we'll have the founder on at some point if I could talk him in. Maybe it'll be a phone interview because he doesn't want to show his face. Just a kind of a humble guy, make it a great product that you will not be embarrassed to either buy for someone else or for yourself. PatriotCoolers.com, promo code KYLE. Don't forget them. Let's get back into it. We'll just jump back into this conversation.
All right. And what about lockdowns? What do those look like in Oklahoma?
Yeah, so COVID was kind of a crazy story for me. So in April, I'm trying to remember when I actually caught it. So I think this was after the election, and it was in April of 2021.
Would have had to been. Yeah,
April of 2021 when COVID first started coming into the United States. So I was actually on orders at the time.
So we were hearing about it in March of 2020. That's when we started seeing the lockdowns roll across and people, the 2 weeks to slow the spread all happened. I'm trying to do this by memory as well, but I think that's the way that it went down. So that was prior to election.
Yeah.
And I
but
know
the
I first got it.
lockdowns didn't really start until Biden came in. It's so hard.
No, they definitely happened under Trump. This was the wildest part of it because in 2020, we had the Summer of Love stuff. I went out and did I watched them lock down Albuquerque in March of 2020. About 3 weeks before that, they had locked down the Northeast outside of D.C., and it slowly rolled across in March so that by late March 2020, I'm in Albuquerque, and in the same week, I was allowed to sit down in a restaurant, hang out with my friends, and there were 200 people in there. And at the end of the week, I got yelled at for standing when I tried to order the pizza that I was at, and you had to take it home with you. Yeah, you couldn't sit here and eat it. That stuff. So that happened in March of 21, if memory serves. So if that helps orient the mental map. It's so crazy how many things we've gone through.
Yeah,
in the last couple of years.
Well, that's the reason why. Going back, that's why one of the things that these are nice is what this does is this memorializes events. Like I'm playing, my buddy and I were playing the game, and we're like, oh, I forgot that happened.
Right. Yeah. No, I think this is what's going to be really interesting to people. We're not hawking anything, but if they want to buy your game, they can, because I think they're going to find. I think it's interesting to hear the backstory on why you made it more than anything else, and then. If people have that same sort of sarcastic thing and you got time to sit down and play a tabletop game with some friends and you want to remember the weird times, which were truly weird, you guys have immortalized it in a special way.
Yeah. So
kind of a fun, nerdy way, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. So if I remember, so I actually caught COVID like really early. I think it was actually in 2020, March 2020 is when it first started rolling out. I caught COVID in April of 2020.
Okay, that's real early then.
Really early, and I caught it because I was on orders, and the guys who were coming in through the airports were like catching crap from people. So, so I got exposed super early. I was the first person in my unit to catch COVID.
Okay.
I was in my house for like 3 weeks. My blood oxygen levels were dropping. I actually had passed out and collapsed in my house due to low oxygen. My wife had to call the ambulance. They like had full on hazmat kit, and they came and put me on oxygen, and I thought I was going to die. And I didn't get intubated or any of that stuff. But so what I'm trying to get at there is that my command knew that I had COVID before. Okay? Yep. And going into the next year, after the election, after all that debacle, that was very eye opening. And I'm like, are they going to steal the election? And they stole it. They stole the election.
I like that you whispered it. Like, what the hell happened? You know what? You could be a Gnostic, but I honestly think that's God's hand in the world that saved us from something far more disturbing. And if we hadn't had that 4 years,
it's a wake up call.
Think about where we would have been. Think about all the things you've realized in the last couple of years from your perch, and how many things are shared. We've never met. We've never spoken before. This is the first time we're sitting down talking. And we probably agree on a whole bunch of things that have happened in the last 4 years because it's been revealed in a way that we can't deny it, I don't think.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's very interesting. So essentially,
So they stole it.
So they stole it. Oh,
Is there a card? Is there a steal it card?
But we do have a ballot dump card.
Ballot dump. Good.
Okay. Yeah. We also got digital dilemma.
What's the digital?
That's for the laptop. It says blow hookers, money laundering, and influence peddling. Life is fun without consequences. So
very, very much. I love it. So this was, of course, the October sort of surprise that wasn't, because it was suppressed, the laptop of Hunter Biden, which came out in October of 2020. So you got a card that memorializes that moment.
Well, we have a couple of them. Yeah.
Because it's truly wild that they did that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing is about the
they
game
is the FBI, and they is the intel community, which we found out from the Twitter files. Do you have a Twitter files card?
No, but I do have hostile takeover.
Okay. So that's for
and it says let that sink in.
So that's an Elon Musk takeover moment. Okay.
Yeah. So like those bad behavior. So the funny thing about the game is those bad things that they did, you can do it in the game and it affects the game the same way it did in real life. So it's almost like war gaming out what they did.
Right. But we're doing it in a sarcastic way.
In a sarcastic, satirical
exactly,
comedy way. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing exactly that that's what was perpetrated against just regular people. And they didn't know it at the time. I guess that's the key. They didn't know it. So you have the card to be able to play on them.
Yeah. And that's the whole part of the game is there's so many little nuanced things in there. They're going to play it and be like, what is that? They're going to look up like, oh, I can't believe that happened. So it's a way to teach people about the way the system works.
Yeah. It sounds like a really good way to radicalize your teenage kids too. Okay, keep. That's great. The underlying purpose has now been revealed on accident, self-discovery. Okay, keep telling me about your. So they stole the election. We're into 2021. Biden comes in and takes over. I'm assuming this is where we're going to go because this must have some consequence for you. Yeah. All right, lay it on me.
So what happened was, so July of 2021, I had to go to NTC, National Training Center, for 6 weeks, going out, fighting, a fake army with our brigade.
What do they call the big exercise they do there? Is it called Red Flag or something like that?
So Red Flag, I believe, is the Air Force one.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm familiar with.
Yeah, Red Flag is the Air Force version of NTC.
Okay, so
it's at Fort, I think it's Irwin.
That sounds right.
And Death Valley.
I never did that, but it sounds like they probably have better housing than the Army has, if I had to guess.
The Air Force does for sure. Yeah, we were in the box. We were in the box for 6 weeks. It was 115 degrees, no showers, no nothing. That's the reason I had a portable washer and dryer in my truck. And I was only able to get away with it because I was a warrant and I had my own 30K generator. I was towing behind me. But
wild. And so you're doing what, like a simulated jock, or you're doing something like that, or?
Yeah. So essentially, we're fighting a fake Russians essentially. Uh-huh. And we have brigade size elements and all these battalions and all these infantry battalions that are going out capturing essentially these villages, and we're having to essentially face drone threats, face fake armor threats, fake infantry threats, and then our job is every 3 days to pick up and move an entire brigade every 3 days. So we have to, in the desert, it's 115 degrees. My biggest worry there is my guys getting heat gas. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, these COVID measures start rolling out. We're starting to see some of this stuff come out. And I'm like, number one, I'm not going to test myself with some new experiment. I'm not going to be a guinea pig.
But why not? Why not?
Well, that's because I've read history books and I know what governments do to people.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. How many people do you think figured that out? How did your guys take it at the time?
Well,
what was the mix?
So about 50-50.
Joe is an interesting animal. Can we agree on that?
Joe likes, he's that same guy that gets distracted by fast cars, booze, and women. That's the guy. And my job is to keep him on track. Like, no, pay attention. You're supposed to do your job.
Yeah, Joe has the same problem that every teenager has, the three H's, as Mr. Donahue used to say. Yeah. So, and the other thing is that I'm trying to keep these guys from getting lifelong injuries for a training environment. And I'm like, there's it's one thing to get deployed and to get hurt
fighting a bad guy doing a mission. It's a completely different animal when you have a soldier who gets injured during training. It's unacceptable.
As somebody who ended up with a full-on heat stroke, I can empathize with that. What is it? What was the movie? There's a soundbite in my head, but I can't think of where it's from. Where the guy's like, "Yeah, and if you do that, you get diarrhea forever," and the kid's like, "Diarrhea forever."
Forever.
I can't remember what it was. It was a little kid. It was a cute movie too. It was one of those kids movies. Anyway, diarrhea forever is not cool.
I have a funny heat stroke story about NTC. So,
do it.
As I told you, I used to take a snow cone machine with me whenever we go out to the field because I was National Guard. Because why not?
I feel like you might have had an arcade machine there too, like in the back of this.
We did. We actually had a shelter. We had an SNES Classic in there, and I was running Mortal Kombat tournaments.
Classic.
Yeah. So
I've got you pegged already. I got you pegged, Cameron. I'm like, I know what's going on here. I see this. This guy's all about. He's keeping the morale up, so we'll allow it.
I'm the snack officer. That's my job. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Got the lickies and chewies in the pocket.
For sure. I had contractors running into town. I was giving them cash, and they were getting me steaks and breakfast stuff. And I was having them bring the stuff in so my guys could cook breakfast, while everyone else was standing in the DFAC line. And my guys over there dancing, cooking bacon, eating steak for breakfast.
Yeah. Hey, it's all about morale at that point.
It's all about morale.
Sometimes you need an IFAC. Sometimes you just need an eye snack, right?
That's right. So we had a guy. I was in some tent working with some E7 type for some networking issues they were dealing with. I was helping them troubleshoot it. And we had a sergeant who was sitting down, and we were like, "Hey, Sergeant, are you all right?" And he's like, and then we look at him, and he collapses. He was having a heat stroke. And I was like, we go into gear. We immediately run outside, grab the ice blankets, so we get his legs up. We start wrapping him up, keeping his body down. And I'm like, I got an idea. I ran over to my hooch where my corporal was, like, "Hey, Corporal Parker, give me a snow cone with pina colada, stat." And so he's like, "Oh, yes, Chief." He makes it real quick, and I put pina colada on there, and I do the thing, and I run over to him. And I'm like, "Hey, Sergeant." And he's like, barely. I was like, "Start eating this. It'll make you feel better." And he's like, just eating it, and he's like, he's like out of it. And then when he came to, he was like, "Who brought me a snow cone in the desert?" Yeah. And I'm like, "Oh, that was me." He's like, "I thought it was hallucinating because I didn't think anybody would have a snow cone in the desert."
So heat stroke is a real weird animal, and doing that mental awareness check is good. And he obviously got lost on there. And I've seen guys that have been completely devastated. I was still aware, but my body was gone. Yeah. And I've told this story once or twice to people, but it's one of those classic, like, only in the military moments. I was stripped down completely down to my Ranger panties. I'm on a bench for some reason. I feel like I was on like a wooden bench, which was really uncomfortable. They were covering me with ice, and the medic goes, "Hey man, sing me a song." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Sing me a song." And I was like, "What do you want to hear?" Like, what would you like? And he's like, "Whatever you got."
Just a small town boy.
Yeah. So no, I immediately went to Bohemian Rhapsody. I was like, "Is this the real life?" It's the perfect song. Laying there, like, basically half naked, surrounded by a couple of dudes who were putting ice on my body out in North Carolina, laying on a piece of wood that I shouldn't be on. And then eventually they were like, "Yep,
my neck,
he can sing.
My back." No, I'm just kidding.
And they'd be like, "This man's fine. Get him back into the field. Put him back to work." No, I was messed up. Yeah, the heat can really mess people up, and as you said, it can be a permanent thing. So diarrhea forever could be a real thing for your sergeant there. And you pina coladaed him. You should have made him sing the pina colada song, obviously.
If you like pina colada.
Yeah, if you want this, you have to sing it. Sergeant. Sing for your pina colada. That would have been the right move.
Dance, soldier, dance. Yeah. So
Joe would dance too. Let's be real.
He would dance.
Even if he was near death. That's troubling to me. Okay, so you got guys that are falling out, and do you think that was related at all to COVID, or that was just a straight heat stroke issue? Was there?
It was 115 in the shade.
Yeah, I felt like that killed COVID. Isn't that what we learned, that it died in the desert? Didn't hit people out.
They wanted people to wear masks in the desert.
Why not? Just mop simulations.
Full on retards. So
correct. Yeah.
So essentially, before going to NTC, one of the things that started happening is because me and my soldiers, we were about 50-50 unvaccinated. I was unvaxxed. My plan was to submit a religious accommodation.
And they were flirting with the mandate, but they hadn't mandated. I think we'd seen the OSHA mandates at that point, right? Is that about right?
Yeah, they started flirting with it. And people are like, "Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do those things." So I'm nerdy, as you know. And so I started researching all the regulations and all the laws. Like, okay, well, you're not allowed to discriminate against people. You're not allowed to separate them based off their religious beliefs. You're not allowed to coerce them, try to get them to change all their stuff. And guess what the Army did? All the things they weren't supposed to do. They literally would, hey, if you're vaccinated, stand over here. Everyone else is left is unvaccinated. Okay, you're unvaccinated. Okay, we're going to do the brain swabs before you get into anything. So that was different treatment. If you're unvaccinated, you're not allowed to go do A, B, C, and D. One of the things that happened to us when we were in the field was we had a COVID exposure about halfway through, and I got put into a COVID quarantine camp by the Army. Yeah, so I got put into a quarantine camp by the Army for about 2 weeks.
The thing that they were toying with doing to the masses that everybody was talking about. They did the Australian
they did it to me in my soldiers.
Yeah,
and we had in the cats that were in there with me, we had a CW5 in there. We had a bunch of guys from the New York National Guard. We had a bunch of pilots that were in there, and the reason they were in there was because they were unvaxxed. They were unvaxxed because they were civilian pilots. They didn't want to lose their their pilot's license. They were trying to have kids. We had people with medical issues. There's everything you can imagine on the reasons why people don't want to take an experimental drug was the reason why people were there, and they were treated differently, and they were discriminated against. And we had a general at Fort Irwin who came in and told us that it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated when we were there.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, that's great. Like all the stuff that they were saying on CNN was the same crap this general was saying to us as we were in a quarantine camp. And he was like, well, for now, you're not forced to get it. So he was like, kind of threatening. I was like, okay. Thank God.
Do you remember what your thoughts were about where that was going to go as a student of history at that point?
I was hoping it wasn't going to go the way it went. But, I was getting worried. My spidey senses were tingling. And I started reading the writing on the wall. And thank God I was out of my service obligation. I was one deep in my field. And I'm thinking, if this gets worse, am I going to stay in? Because I was going to do 20 years. I was in the Army at the time for almost 13 years, almost 14 years.
You're over the hump.
I'm over the hump. I'm about to make CW3. My plan was to make CW5, and I could have done it, where I was at, so it was kind of nerve wracking. And so I started thinking about what am I going to do? And I started thinking, am I going to have to resign my commission? And when we got back, it just started getting worse. The mandate came out. The illegal behavior that was taking place from the orders coming from the president to the illegal orders coming from the SecDef. And within the orders, they were blatantly illegal.
Yeah, how do you know they were illegal? That's the question. Refusing an unlawful order is one of the things we get training on, and but it's not robust, I don't think. So how did you know it was illegal?
Well, in order to sound, I don't know if I think this is the correct word. It was prima facie, based off of the clear reading of the statute. So I had it within two different capacities. Okay, I had the capacity as a soldier, and I also had the capacity as a civil servant, and I got it from both sides. On the Army side, as a soldier, there were specific protections that soldiers get when they invoke their religious beliefs and submit religious accommodations. They're not allowed to separate you. They're not allowed to attempt to change your mind. They're not allowed to challenge your religious beliefs. They're not allowed to single you out. Those specific things were the things they were doing.
Yeah. So prima facie, on its face, they were directly violent. It's almost like they took the statute and they used it as a rule book of, okay, well, this is what we're not supposed to do.
What not to do. And then on top of that, it was the emergency use authorization. It makes you wonder why they made those
rules in the first place, doesn't it? Like, it's almost like they could see that if you wanted to protect people from a certain type of treatment, this is the things they would do. So we made that illegal. And then they went, yeah, we don't give a shit about that. We're just going to do it anyway. Yeah. Those are inconvenient. I hate those inconvenient laws that are for your own personal protection, your civil liberties. It really bothers me.
So I started, the issue that I saw was there were so many lower enlisted that were also being jerked around by, NCOs and officers that were just doing things for their ego. That was the other gross thing that I saw. Was there was abuse taking place that wasn't even directed. It was because they had power and authority over people, and they could screw with them. And that made me sick, and I handled it and dealt with it where I could, but I was one deep in an entire battalion. And so instead of going that route, I was like, I have a better idea. I'm going to resign my commission in protest. I'm one deep in my field. No one has ever done this for this state here. And you're going to feel the pain when I'm gone. And so that's what I did. I resigned my commission.
One deep, so people understand, there's no bench behind you. There's no acting person who's going to step into your role. You're the guy that does that job. If you don't do that job, there's literally no one. That is not a quickly replaced position. And
no,
you decided to make them feel what that looked like.
These are intelligence systems. When I'm not there, they run analog. There is no SIGINT.
Interesting.
There is no SATCOM communication.
What was it like when you? What did you write in your resignation?
Well, so I also put some information in there about Afghanistan. The Afghanistan fall was, I had almost like a panic attack when that happened, because
that was August of 21.
August of 21. It was like right before that. When I was in country, I worked with interpreters that were local nationals. I had, we had direct face-to-face relations with these people, and then seeing, just the fall of Afghanistan. I think we had like 15 guys get killed in my deployment. We had like one of the people that I talked with, my friends got blood or leg blown off. I got shot at. I had rockets shot at me and stuff, and we had people that got hurt and all those types of things. Like, what was all of it for? If you're just gonna like fumble it at the end and throw it away, is that what we are? We just throw away people now, and that's how it felt. It felt like they were just throwing us away. And
we had three moments happen almost simultaneous. If you touch that back again, and I've done it too many times to not be okay with it. They had the mandates roll out at the same time as they failed in Afghanistan, and they spit in the face of many good men and women who went over there and either bled or died. And then they also hit Mar-a-Lago and ran a search warrant there. And that's more close to what I saw happen on, the overreach on my end of it. But, I have a lot of friends that served in Afghanistan as well. Three things really, really fast. And it felt like one of them, it felt like the mandates were to shut up anybody that felt strongly about the other two. That's what it felt like at the time to me.
From my perspective, there was a purge.
How long have you been using the word purge? Since it happened.
It reminded me of what happened leading up. So it has a lot of parallels. If you go back so let's go to a different place. Let's look at Ukraine 2014 Maidan coup. Okay. Prior to that, I forget, was it Yanukovych? I don't remember the name of it. Is it Yanukovych? I'm trying to remember the guy's name.
That sounds right.
I think it's right. So essentially, prior to that, one of the things that happened leading up to that is they gutted the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military was gutted so I believe the Russian backed. I'm trying to remember if this was Russian backed. Maybe I'm confused, but sorry, I'm getting distracted. But essentially what happened is before they, invaded, there was a subterfuge of Ukraine, of gutting the military forces of their enemy. And it really reminded me of that's exactly what they were doing. It was so coordinated. It was pull local soldiers out of here, arrest the political leader, and then all of his followers inside of the law enforcement and military were going to come up with an excuse to identify, separate, and kick them out in mass.
Yeah,
that's how it seemed to me.
So we look for compliance, and the non-compliant are purged. And then you saw that both. What about the civilian end of it from your civilian job? Did you see that happening as well?
It was worse.
Right? Isn't that crazy? I had people from the military tell me about how bad it was, and I was like, "Yeah, sounds like there was some process there that was still followed." Because at least there's a hierarchy, right? At least in the military, it's a hierarchy, so at least it's semi-uniform. It wasn't just like unit to unit, completely incoherent. But civilian service, every agency had its own policy. Every individual office of that agency had their own policy, and every individual crappy administrative officer who was some like morbidly obese, blue-haired lesbian
They all
that
became
person.
mask Nazis.
Yeah, they all immediately just went right down the line and told you what, like they wanted to universalize their opinions, it felt like, which was godless. It also turned out.
Yeah. So I resigned my commission in protest with the Army.
Okay. How
In
long was your
November.
letter? Just out of curiosity.
About 2 pages.
Okay.
About 2 pages.
Yeah.
So, surprisingly, my battalion commander at the time actually, I think, respected me for doing it. Because I think he felt similar. He just, he was really close to retirement. I don't know if he had it in him to kind of go to that level, go to that extreme. And what's kind of funny is after I resigned my commission, my promotion was still pending, and they still promoted me.
They promoted you after you resigned your commission?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
How does that work? Did you get to pay for it?
No.
You,
No.
you just got the
But
paperwork?
it says on my discharge papers CW3. So I was like, thanks guys, appreciate it. Because it was too much paperwork for them not to do it. It was like already there. So it just
They
went
used to
through
call
it.
that. I've heard that called like a tombstone promotion when somebody was leaving, but not when they resign in protest. That's an interesting play. Classic bureaucracy, huh?
So
Take it.
I'll take it, But so that happened. And then on my Air Force civilian side, so this is when things got interesting. So I had submitted 2 religious accommodations to the United States Air Force, one for the vaccine mandate. I already had natural immunity. They knew that. Everybody knew that. And they ignored natural immunity, even though it's in the regulation. They didn't follow it. They also did the exact same type of stuff where they separated people. We had guys that were like engineers and stuff who were getting organ transplants, and their doctors were like, don't get the COVID shot. I don't recommend it. And then the Air Force was giving them a hard time. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Right.
Like, why are you screwing around with these people's lives for a job? It's a job. You're not a slave.
Right.
And so when I submitted my religious accommodation, I did it for the mask mandate and the religious and the vaccine mandate. I felt the masks were dehumanizing.
Was the mask combined with testing as well?
Oh, yeah.
Were those?
Yeah, they wanted us to do forced testing every week. If you were unvaccinated, you had to get tested like 2 or 3 times a week, going up into your brain.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to travel.
Right.
We had all these special rules that applied to us because of our religious beliefs.
Which would slow down promotions if people wanted to go on particular TDYs, temporary duties, to go get additional experiences. So there were like tangible costs to those things and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so
then
that was universal across this experience, I think.
Yep. So I submitted 2 religious accommodations. When I submitted the one for the mask mandate, they threatened to arrest me.
Oh, good. What would the charge be?
Not wearing a mask. I don't know.
Good. Yeah. Just we don't like what you're doing. Some sort of insubordination.
So they threatened to arrest me, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh well."
Yeah.
And they're like, and I was like, "I'll go home."
Because it's at will employment. That's the thing.
It's
that
at will
seemed to be-
employment. I
Yeah.
was
You
also
mentioned
one deep in
slaves
my
earlier,
field with the
so-
Air Force too. Yeah. So I was running big IT systems for the Air Force, designing data centers, running email systems, running instant messaging systems, high level stuff. And they wanted to play that kind of game with me.
Let me put a question to you that has become relevant in the last couple days. We're seeing all these floated. I think they're threats from former federal workers who've been removed, probationary workers, and so on. That these former workers, and in this case, it could have been you as a former worker or someone who's been threatened with your job, could become a threat to national security because without your job, you might have to go to one of the enemies and ply your trade there. Was that something that anybody cared about at the time? That they were endangering national security with your removing the patient?
My position that I was on one of the programs that was of very high importance to national security. What I was doing with the Air Force, very high, very important, brand new program. Okay, special access stuff.
So somebody would have paid you a lot of money to go and betray your country,
Right.
I imagine.
Oh yeah.
And they wouldn't have made you get a mask or a nasal swab.
No.
Would that
And-
ever have entered your mind?
No. I love my country. I've like bled for it. My friends have too. My dad has. My my family goes all the way back to on my mom's side. We have people in my family who fought in Yorktown.
Mm-hmm.
So
what do you think about when you see those headlines like that? I know we cover on the podcast on a pretty frequent basis now in the last couple of days.
I think those headlines exist because there isn't any deterrence. That's what I think's going on. I don't think Trump has full control of the government yet.
No, I don't know if he'll be able to, honestly. It's so big.
Yeah.
Unless they do the 80% rule, which would be interesting.
Yeah. But needless to say, after they threatened to arrest me, I started looking for a new job. And thank God, a couple weeks later, I had a new job with a raise. And I sat down and I told a lieutenant colonel and major to their face on my exit interview that I didn't think the senior leaders within the Department of Defense would recognize an unlawful order if it slapped them in the face. That's what I told them. And then I also told them, like, I understand you guys are a major and lieutenant colonel. You're a field grade officer. I was a field grade officer about 6 weeks ago. When I got asked to do unlawful stuff, guess what I did? I resigned my commission in protest. So I have zero empathy for you guys being cowards. And what COVID was to me was a pandemic of cowardice. That's what it was.
You just named our episode, so that's good. I haven't heard it called that, but you're spot on. How many people were revealed? The thing that that I make people reflect on. You hear all these people that say they'd give their life for their country, and yet some of them wouldn't even risk their job or their paycheck for a few minutes.
Yeah, their ego. It's their ego. It's their social standing. It's all bullcrap. It's all this stuff that we've been taught that we think's important. And like, none of that's important. The only thing that's important is your family, being able to feed your family, do the things you need to be able to do, and making memories. That's what's important. And like, the biggest thing to me when it was all said and done is I had to be able to look at myself in the mirror and be okay with who I saw looking back.
What is your family situation? Well, how did your immediate family, and then I haven't heard any mention of getting married or anything like that. So I'm assuming that. Is that, are you?
Oh, yeah. So I'm married. I got 2 kids.
Oh, they're hiding in the background, disappearing. They haven't been brought up. I just wanted to see what your perspective on there. When you say that you got to look yourself in the mirror, what about looking your kids in the mirror or looking your kids in the eye?
I got to be able to say, "Hey, your dad's not a coward."
Mm-hmm.
I do what I believe, and I say what I believe, and I'm not afraid to do that. There was a time in my life where I wouldn't be okay with coming out and speaking on the rooftops, and like I don't proselytize like the things that I believe in normal society, but when the rubber meets the road and when it matters, sometimes you got to have balls. You got to do it.
It's so simple.
It's simple. Bravery's simple. It's just hard.
Right. I think that's what Steve Friend and I kind of came to. It's simple, but it's not easy, and turns out it's less common than we thought. Was that surprising to you? How few people said this is not right? Yeah. What would you have thought the number density would have been in a group of people that worked for the government in a military organization or guys in the army? What would you have thought that they would have stepped up if you had to guess before that?
30%, 40%. In reality, it was probably less than 10.
Yeah, I think that's the number. That's pretty much the numbers I saw, at least in the Bureau as well. But I would have expected 3-4 times that. Agreed. Maybe not half, but I still would have thought like a strong minority would have been there, like a vocal and aggressive minority.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be like a really, really quiet minority.
So what I did is I left the Air Force.
Yeah.
I left the Army and the Air Force within 6 weeks. Quit both my jobs with the same reasons. Due to COVID, due to discrimination, due to all the illegal stuff that I saw. When I was working, doing IT stuff, and, I thought, I don't ever want to be in a position again, ever, where people could tell me what to do like that.
Right.
And my buddy, Eric, he's the guy who makes all the cards. So I'm actually the CTO, the technology officer. Eric's the CEO. He also did all the artwork.
I was going to say, who's the chief artist? Because that stuff's talent. That's a talent.
Yeah. So what happened is we both have wanted to kind of start a business, and we were like, hey, let's start a small business. We've never done it before. Let's try to find something simple that we can do that no one's done before. And him and I like to, smoke and joke and drink and get on the phone, because we don't live next to each other. Mm-hmm. And he lives across the country. And so, we sent each other memes. And one time he sent me this meme from the Whatever podcast. And it was a meme of, I don't know if you remember this scene where I think it had Kiko, and that one guy who was asked if he would sleep with a tranny, and he was like, no, that's gay. And so he made like a Pokemon card version of that.
It was, would you rather sleep with an old, like ugliest woman in the world or like the hottest tranny in the world?
Yeah. And so
Something
we
like
made
that.
we made a card called Gigabase Chase. And for him, and I was like,
was that the Sovereign Bro guy? Was that the guy who said it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think his name was Chase. So we came up with the thing.
Yeah,
for
Chase.
it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so I was like, dude, what if we made a card game that's kind of like has some Pokemon influences? So this is where the cards come in. When I was a kid, I loved playing Pokemon. I loved playing the Game Boy games. I loved watching the show.
Okay.
I used to go to Pokemon tournaments and get like the Boulder badge when I was like 12 and 11. My mom would take me there, and it was such a good, like, wholesome thing. It was a way for me to like decompress and deal with stuff. And another thing that, I like to do to decompress is shit talk and make fun of stuff.
There's a guy. I think it's Tom Segura. You familiar with him as a comedian?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Tom Segura at one point in time, he's like, people ask me about my hobbies. I said, like, I guess online shopping. Like, I was like, I didn't know shit talking was a hobby, but I guess I do too. That's really funny. Oh, okay. So I'll add that to my list of hobbies on my resume. And like, what are you into? I'm like, I like firearms. I like going outside with my kids and shit talking strangers. That's good. Okay, so
kind of where this came from, like early 2000s when Halo started coming out, me and my friends would all get together. So the guy who did the artwork, he's my stepbrother.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were teenagers, we used to go to our buddy's house and we would play Halo 2 online or play Halo online. And one of my other friends, he was an MLG. He was like Major League Gamers. He was really, really, really good at Halo 2 at the time. And so he would play online, and Eric's job, he's so much funnier than I am, way better shit talker than me. And his only job was to shit talk. So he would put on the headphones, and his job was just to make fun of people till they cried. And
so you got one guy doing the gaming, and he's focused in on it, and the other guy on the headset
he's running psychological operations on his enemies. Yeah,
he's shit talking on behalf of the guy that's actually playing really well, not actually being the player.
Right.
This is a team kind of idea. Look, I've never played games like that, but I do appreciate a good shit talk. And
we would just sit in the background and laugh because, like,
he had an audience too, not just the audience.
Oh yeah, because we're like, that's a good one. Yeah.
Like, so he's got an
teabag him again.
It's a studio audience. Okay, this is probably unfair. That's probably an unfair advantage for most. Most of those guys are playing by themselves in their basement.
Yeah, they're like 10 years old, and you're like, feed them up.
Yeah, or they're 40 years old and this is their only outlet in life, and they've got like a wife that's like nagging on them, so now they go down to their basement to get away, and they've got some. And how old are you guys? You're teens?
Like 15, 16.
Yeah, so you got some teenage professional gaming level, and then like a 15-year-old shit talker who's got an audience that's amateur comedian. Perfect. All right, I love it.
So
now I see where this game grows out of. This makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So we get the idea to, how about, and I'm an intelligence guy. I did Army intelligence for a long time. I understand intel preparation of the battlefield. I understand the DNP military decision-making process. I'm a big RTS guy. I like real-time strategies. I play StarCraft, Command and Conquer. I also like to play Warno. If people know RTS stuff, Warno is like really.
That's the best.
Oh yeah. It has all the correct symbology and stuff, and it's like
this is like high level nerding that we're getting here right now. But
yeah. So really into that, and I'm like, all the stuff that's been happening, it's so hard to like understand and comprehend. So I was like, why don't we make a card game that's kind of like Magic and Pokemon that's for wargaming? All the politics, wargaming, all of the things that's going on, putting it into a way that's easier to understand. But how do we get people interested into it? How do we get them to understand the truth without being offended? And I watched the South Park special from the COVID special from South Park. Yep. And I remember seeing there's a scene in there where Butters is running around trying to sell everybody NFTs. I'm like, I could do that. I see myself in Butters. And I was like,
that is not who you want to see yourself in necessarily.
But from the South Park special, he was like super successful.
Yeah. Okay.
So essentially what we decided to do was make essentially a satirical trading card game that captures stuff that's happening on a weekly basis that comes through the news. Essentially, like the jokes write themselves. Like we would just watch what's happening in the news, make a card making fun of it, put it in, build the game mechanics so that the thing that is happening in the news on the card makes sense within the game and mechanically has the same effect in the game. So it's not just that they're funny. It's not just that it's satire. It's not just that it's a trading card game. It's that the jokes are built into the game mechanics so that it affects the game the way it affects the real world.
And so if you're an outside observer who's a relatively snarky person who sees change the narrative and somebody says the same word over and over again and it has a certain effect on people in reality, do you have a change the narrative card?
No, but we do have a Fang Fang card. It's a trap. And
it's a trap.
And it's a trap, and the ability says swallow well, and her effect is to steal political power, or as we like to call it, PP, because all the cards have political power, and all politics is just dick measuring contest, and so all the cards have the tower of political power, which is just a building that's shaped like a dick in the corner, and the point of the game is to destroy your opponent's PP, and when their PP goes to 0, they go to jail. So the point of the game, is destroy your opponent's political power and put them in jail.
Yeah, reduce their PP to 0.
Reduce their PP to 0. Yeah. We got
classic.
We got like General Flynn over here.
Zero-sum game too. It sounds like.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Can you collaborate with other players to? You can.
It's multiplayer.
Okay, tell me how this works.
Yeah, so the way it works is, so one of the things about like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and all these other games, it's like 1v1.
Mm-hmm.
I love Dungeons and Dragons. I started playing in the Army. It's a drinking game. I like it. It's kind of like charades with beer and like Cards Against Humanity kind of mixed together. That's how D&D really is.
Okay.
And that was the thing that I liked about it. And, I wanted something that had a 5 or 6 people could play, for about an hour, laugh about it, kind of think about some of the strategizing, kind of enjoy some of the combat mechanics of the game, and to kind of walk away and be like, I learned something, And so the game supports up to 6 players.
Okay.
You can do 1v1, you can do a 3-person free-for-all, 4-person free-for-all, 5 or 6 people, and you can pick up to 6 different political factions. Here's the box.
Less people think otherwise. Like this is a very professionally laid out. The printing, it looks really, really good.
Thank you.
When I saw them, I'm like, he's making these fun memes, and I'm like, I think there's actually like a real product behind this. So you would send me these in posts. I would post something, and you would throw some of these cards up. So just so people know, this was a completely random, organic connection through a social media. Just I recognized a counterpoint in somebody else with the same kind of humor, and I like this. I had a friend who created a game that he wanted to do that was like a Cards Against Humanity type of thing, but it doesn't have anywhere near the sophistication from what I can tell. I never actually wanted to play that. Cards Against Humanity, you do it a few times, it's novel, and then you have kids and you got no time, and so it's not what I'm going to spend my time doing with my spouse.
Yeah.
This does seem like it's kind of a fun thing, especially if you got a little bit older kids, you can get them involved. Carry on. Tell me. Okay, so 6 players, they can factionalize. They can create alliances behind the scenes.
Yeah, you can create alliances. So the way the game's structured is there's 70 card decks. It's actually 69 plus 1 because that's funny. And you essentially
so juvenile. Okay.
So essentially you build a deck around a champion. So the deck that you get from us, the main starter pack, is our Conquest pack, and it comes with 2 champions. It's General Flynn versus Barack Obama.
Got it. Interesting.
Okay? Yep. And so he's MAGA. That's our caricature of MAGA. We couldn't really use MAGA because it's trademarked and all that stuff. But they're like, what is a good caricature that has the essence of MAGA? I'm like, we got to figure out another acronym. I'm like, MAGA stands for Make Illegals Go Away. And so,
Build the wall.
We were just trying to, make fun of it. So, but essentially the way it works is you have a 70 card deck. You have a champion in the back that has 5,000 political power. And you play operatives and heroes to the front row. And the way that you do that is through our currency system. And the currency that we're using is CFC, or crumbling fiat currency.
Nice.
And so here's one. This one's funding for Ukraine. So you
Good.
get $1 billion, and you got to pay to play. So you pay $1 billion to deploy your FBI agent to the field, and he gets to politically attack his political enemies. And if he reduces their political power to 0, they go to jail. The other thing that you have in there is you also have cards that are flipped over on the bottom that work as traps. So some of the traps are like ballot dump. This allows you to go and search your deck for a card. So the game kind of makes sense thematically, the way the game feels. You'll be like, okay, or like this one, judge shopping. You get +4 influence. So you get more influence to use to fuel your special abilities. So
Right.
it all kind of starts making sense. And so what this does is it gives you structure and framework to actually understand what's going on. Like another thing to think about is like the way that we build the games in the decks typically have to have like 20 to 25 billion worth of resource for a 70 card deck. And when you start thinking about the amount of money that USAID was going out, there's like $100 billion or $500 billion. You start thinking about that. That's like 10 decks worth of money. And you're thinking, how many resources could they actually deploy? And you start thinking about it like that. And you're like, oh, it starts putting it into perspective on what's happening, why it's happening, why people are being attacked, why they're like the judge. They just deployed a hero, Judge, what is like Bershon, or whatever the heck his name is. They deployed him in the field. They paid for him. They put him out on the field. Now he's using his special ability to attack Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, and the question is Pete Hegseth going to have other operatives and heroes around him to protect him, or is he going to lose all his political power and go to jail? So it puts a lot of this stuff into context. It's essentially a wargaming tool.
How is it received? What are the age of your kids?
I have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old.
Okay.
So both boys.
Okay, you got boys. So you had less sins probably than I did. I have 3 girls, so I told my wife, I was like, we knew. I got one boy. He's wild. He's 4 though, so I got some ways. How did they take this? Because let's see, that would have been 2 years ago was when the real wild stuff. 3 years ago, I guess. So one of them was pretty young, but one of them was old enough to know what's going on, at least in the world. What's his happiness?
Yeah. So, I mean, really from what they saw, we really try to protect them from the stuff from that. They understood that dad's not in the army anymore. They understood that, dad got a new job, and I tried to make the best out of it. At that time I was now working from home. So I'm a kind of guy, when I get hit with lemons, I make lemonade.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. I made lemonade out of it. I used the opportunity to spend more time with my family. The kids' direct perspective was pretty much just the mask mandates. And we just gave stuff to the school saying they're not getting masks, they're not getting vaccines. If you don't like that, we'll go somewhere else. So that was when you've already done that for 2 jobs, you can do that for everywhere else. Just like whatever. You know?
Yeah, the cost gets lower and lower once you lose the biggest things.
Yeah. I'm not afraid to go
How does the experience that you've had, how does that affect the way that you're parenting your kids and maybe what your boys are learning? I mean, you started off a dad who was in the army and did basically double tours of civil service and military service. So where does that lead you as what you're teaching them about the government? So that's loaded on purpose.
Yeah. Well, they know about the game to an extent, and a lot of this stuff is informed by my personal experience and also from the stuff that I consume through media and the books that I've read. I'm a big reader.
Mm-hmm.
I've read books. I just finished up The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot. I don't know if you've read that.
I have not.
It's you should read it. It is essentially, it's the Cold War. It's from the end of World War II all the way up until essentially Nixon. It's very poignant to this time. And actually, it's Allen Dulles, the CIA, how they overthrew Guatemala in 1954. The reason why the stuff that happened in Cuba happened the way it happened. It talks about the Congo, how we overthrew a populist leader in the Congo for business purposes. And then it goes into the Bay of Pigs. The CIA wasn't happy with JFK because he was wanting to do his stuff, not deep state type stuff. And the deep state type stuff essentially just means whatever Allen Dulles was. Do you know who Allen Dulles was?
I've heard the name, but
you got it, man.
Got to read this book, huh?
Yeah.
The funny thing is that a lot of these names are not the most household, although, I have passing familiarity with them. And you'll realize that the people that were actually, we always say that they, right? And I always tell people there's not like some shadowy group of people sitting around like in the X-Files smoking cigarettes and sitting in a dark room but there are a couple of really bad dudes that have moved things around in ways that are more similar to that than not. I just don't think it's that's not what the deep state necessarily is. Even if it's. Mm-hmm.
So here's another book I'm going to throw at you.
Okay.
The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills. Have you read that one?
I have not.
Read The Power Elite. Power Elite.
You're going to send me a reading list. We'll put it in the show notes.
So the Power Elite essentially came out in 1956. It was released by the Oxford Press, and it was essentially his perception of the American political system, political class from that time, from the Eisenhower administration. Essentially, they talk about how landed aristocracy came to the United States, how the different social norms and structures and between military, government, and the private sector. There's these three main echelons, essentially. So you have military, government, private sector. And at the top, there's people in charge of every single one of them. They're just positions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all those people at the top, guess what? They all know each other. They all go to the same schools. All their families intermarry. They all watch the same movies. They all read the same books. They all go to the same parties. That's the Power Elite. Those are the people, those are the progenitors of the people who are in charge of the West right now.
Yeah,
and so
that aligns with my understanding as well. They don't even have to be coaxed or coordinated because they have co-aligned interest already, and they're already making the same decisions.
Just like how you and I can go into a room we've never met and we all agree on the same things because we have the same frame. We have the same frame.
Yeah,
that's how they are.
Sure. No, it makes perfect sense. And that's how you end up seeing some of these judges that are, we did a piece the other day that was really illuminating, I think. If you looked at the judges in the Colorado Supreme Court, they had a decision about whether or not Donald Trump should be on the ballot. And those that decided he should be on the ballot had all graduated from local Colorado law schools. And all the ones that disagreed were all Ivy Leaguers. Every one of them. They all had the same framework, as you just said.
Big club and you're not in.
I mean, George Carlin may not have been a nice guy, and he probably didn't agree with me on a ton of stuff, but his observations were spot on. Obviously, that's why he was so popular, and he's not wrong in that, right? That's amazing stuff, and it's fun to be able to turn into a card game. I think that being able to take some of the background. Again, nobody would know this if they just looked at the game and they didn't know any of the things that went on in your mind and the experience that generated it. At some point, you signed on to the Declaration for Military Accountability. Maybe we'll kind of terminate with that piece, and you could talk about what you hope will happen, and then we'll tell people where they can find this game, obviously, because that's going to be, some people will be interested, and I'll be curious how many you sell.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And the other cool thing is we actually have a video game version of it as well. It's on Steam, and the video game version of it's free. So it's a module for tabletop simulator. It has online multiplayer and VR support. So you could actually put on VR goggles and pick up the cards and move around and all that fun stuff. So that's cool.
That is very cool. That is involved. That is not just two guys sitting around drawing up a couple things on a piece of paper and cutting it with a paper cutter.
Yeah, making jokes and we worked our frickin' butts off.
I bet you did. Having seen this, like I said, I have a buddy from college who launched a card game, and knowing the number of drafts that he went through and the number and how to get the gameplay just right and the way they wanted it, they spent years doing it. Years. Yeah,
we did 8 months of play testing. I took all my D&D buddies, all the dungeon masters, all the guys I knew, and we're like, all right, we're going to play games. We're doing bug report. Like I attacked it like I was writing software, you know?
Yeah.
So,
that sounds like the right way to go about it, just based on the functionality you're describing to me. It sounds very functional. So I'm impressed just from the systematic end of it, because it does. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. And I think probably most of the audience is listening, going like, yeah, it's a cool idea. Wouldn't know how to launch it. Very interesting that your background actually led to that, which, see, of course it does. Yet another one of those things that makes me think that God's out there keeping his hand on us, straightening us out one way or another. So
DMA, Declaration of Military Accountability. So one of the things that happened after COVID, after I got out, I got on Twitter and I started trying to find people that were, because less than 10%, man, but in our locale, but if you think about it like this, so in our locale, there was a small subset of people that stood up. But if you look at a national level, there was actually a lot of people nationally that did it. But we had no way to communicate or, organize or any of that stuff. So
Yeah.
I started reaching out. It's like, am I alone? I felt completely alone when I resigned my commission. I felt completely alone when I left the Air Force. I had to take a major leap of faith when there was a point in that time to where they said, you're going to do this. And I had to tell them no. And I was like, am I going to have a job tomorrow? And I had to be like, I'm going to have to just do it. I'm going to have some freaking guts. And that's what I did.
Yeah, it's an all-in moment, right?
Yeah, you had to go all in,
Mm-hmm.
So, and so because of that, I started reaching out online, and I actually, there was a soldier that at the time was dealing with quite a few medical bills. I think she had like $50,000 worth of medical bills. The Army had essentially kicked her out. She was a National Guard soldier.
Okay.
And she had, I think, 2 heart attacks, a stroke. Her name was Carolina Stanchek. And I don't know if you may have heard about her. There's been I think she's been on a couple other, things for her stuff.
I feel like I actually recognize her. She's young, right?
She's like 23.
Yeah. She's way too young. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure I've seen her then. I saw all these things when they were going down.
So I reached out to her online on Twitter, and I started linking up. I was like, hey, what's going on with your guard unit? Because I had a platoon sergeant that was under me about a year prior that I had helped him go through a med board. And I was like, hey, let's get you through a med board. This is bull crap. Your unit's not following your paperwork. I'm going to get a hold of my unit. We're going to get a hold of your guard unit. We're going to get this shit figured out. So I got a hold of her, got a hold of my old S1. I was like, hey, get in contact with this soldier. She's having issues. So let's figure out what's going on. Why is she getting screwed over? This is not right.
Mm-hmm.
So got a hold of her, started helping her out. She also got some legal representation. We started going through the process and motions of trying to get, that stuff that stuff handled. And I got a message from her a couple of weeks after that. It's like, hey, we're doing this declaration. Here's the declaration. If you're in, I think you would be a good person to sign it. So I signed it. I was one of the original 231 guys that signed it.
Okay.
And we put it out there, and it essentially was like, hey, we saw a bunch of illegal stuff that happened, and we're going to do everything within our power to influence elections, to push for reform, to create culture, to do anything we can to try to get some help for these guys and gals that were kicked out unlawfully, that had their careers ruined. Many of them have lifelong injuries, and some people have died, man.
Right.
So if I look at the numbers, I think they had 8,600, between 8,000 to 9,000 soldiers were discharged. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's a small piece of what actually happened. What actually happened is that was the tip, the very tip. There was another at least 80 to 100,000 military members that were like me in my boat. That either resigned their commission, that weren't kicked out. I was one of the other guys. They resigned their commission, that retired early, that got out, that didn't re-enlist. There was close to 100,000 of those people.
Yeah.
That were kicked out of the military. Everyone else had their tail between their legs because they were like, oh God, my career. There's another guy, Lance Castle. He's getting court-martialed right now. Have you ever seen that video of the guy?
I trained with Lance Castle. Do you know that?
Yeah, no.
I've been in touch with Lance. I actually sent him a microphone so he could start doing talking to people. But I actually went through. He was in the PJ schoolhouse with me. We knew each other, but like a long time ago. That was the craziest thing I ever saw. And yes, I absolutely saw him. For folks, yeah, you can go ahead and tell the story about the cells that he got pulled out of.
Yeah, so Lance Castle was I think he was a staff sergeant for like 17 years in. And then, he had to go through the process. Hey, you're going to get the shot. Fill out this paperwork. Okay, fill out the paperwork. Denied. You're like, get the shot. And you're like, no. Jail. Throw him in jail. That's essentially what happened.
Yeah, and they busted him down to senior airman. He was an E4.
Yeah, they made him an E4. And now he's getting court-martialed because of him apparently, I don't know the facts of the case.
I've heard some of them, and he and I have talked in the background of it, and they sound insane to me. I actually probably should have him on and have him tell a story if he wants. Yeah. But it's so many people, tiny little, just people who, as you said, a pandemic of cowardice.
Pandemic of cowardice. So I signed the Declaration of Military Accountability. And I met a bunch of great people through that. And there's another guy, he's on Twitter, his name's Drew Outstanding. So Drew Outstanding is also another National Guard soldier. This guy, he has Guillain-Barré syndrome. He's like paralyzed from like the waist down. This guy, because
His handle used to say something about the outfield. Isn't that right? Okay. I feel like I've talked to him as well. I feel like I've talked to a lot of these folks.
You may have. So this guy, so there's some major issues. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is actually push for some reform. So we have some legislative stuff that we're actually pushing for. It's all pretty basic stuff. And it's not just for COVID. It's for like all soldiers. I think I got a little note on. Let me see real quick because I don't want to like misspeak it. I'm sorry. I'm going to pull it up real quick if that's okay.
Okay. And in the meantime, there's guys like Brad Miller that I've talked to that have been part of this thing. We've got guys like Rob Green, who's a prior guest here, wrote books, explained it. People who are incredibly courageous. A lot of them coming from a faith background. Some of them probably also in the what is the category? What do we call it? Alien
astronaut theorists with Gnostic leanings.
Yeah, exactly. So, probably a couple of those too. You're closer to like my Sean Witzman type buddies who are a little bit wild. They got some, but clearly cerebral guys. So we'll slowly convert you over here.
So a couple of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to get auto TRICARE for reserve soldiers. So one of the major issues that happens is, so like, let's say you're on active duty and you have to go get the COVID shot. Okay. We each have some protections. You have TRICARE. Okay. You're going to be able to go to the VA system. You're going to be able to claim stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the difference has to do with Title 10, Title 32, and M-Day drilling status. So if you're Title 32, which is state drilling, or if you're an M-Day soldier, your drilling status, you don't get TRICARE automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You only get it if you have 30 days of consistent orders. And so what would happen is there's a lot of Guard or Reserve soldiers that got vaccine injured who now are not getting any support from the VA.
I see.
Are not getting any support from their units. And like Drew, he has $500,000 in medical debt. $500,000 in medical debt.
Yeah.
And there's no way, he can't work. There's no way for these guys to get over this hump. So one of the things we're trying to do is push for auto TRICARE coverage for Guard or Reserve soldiers, Title 32, M-Day, regardless. So it kind of fixes that gap. We're also trying to, work on streamlining the line of duty process for VA claims.
Yep.
And then to handle some of these out-of-pocket expenses, we want to advocate for a compensation fund for medical costs that are out of pocket. And then the other thing is we want to also work on getting all of duty related injuries automatically categorized as service connected. So makes it
which
just
seems like a a lot of these things no brainer. And the only way you know about these things is because this exposed that the COVID stuff actually exposed this was the problem.
Yeah. And then two other little things, and these are from Drew specifically, is removing the emergency use authorization for COVID. Get that done. We got to remove that. And then the last thing is creating disability codes for vaccine injuries within the VA system. There's like let's say you're vaccine injured from COVID, right? And we all know that the medical establishment has created a process to where they just don't even acknowledge the existence of it. Imagine trying to get a VA claim for something they don't acknowledge exists.
Right. No, I mean, people fought that fight for other symptoms and other situations beforehand. I know Agent Orange was a big fight for that kind of same stuff. This has happened in generation after generation. So we're always playing catch up on that. But that makes a lot of sense to me as well. Yeah. And so you guys are touching out to legislators, state and local, federal, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Can people, what's the website? Do you want to throw that out there so people can find it? If they want to read about military accountability?
Yeah, so that's just militaryaccountability.net.
.net, N-E-T. Okay. So I'll throw that in the show notes as well. If people want to click through it so they can scroll down, they can take a look at that. Let's talk about where they can find this game. Let's tell them where we can sell this game. If somebody is so inclined to radicalize their teen and or their friends, or they just like if they just like drinking and shit talking, if that's part of your hobby set, then where would they find this?
Yeah, so you can hit it in two different places. You can hit our main game website at swampmonsterstcg.com, and then we also have a Shopify store, which is shop.falcontradingcards.com, and we got all of our products listed there.
Okay, so I'll link those as well so people can scroll down and look for that if you guys are so inclined. If you're watching on Spotify, if you're listening in the audio, and Apple or whatever else, folks, it's going to be in the description. So scroll to the bottom. There'll be a series of links. We always do only one sponsor, so I put the the subjects, links to whatever those may be, whatever you're into funding. And that sounds like a fun thing. Have you guys made any money on this thing, or is this just a labor of love so far?
Labor of love, man. We don't make any money off, but we just do it. So it's kind of hard to like find like physical places to sell stuff. You got to break into the market, you know.
Yeah, sure.
This has been a fantastic learning opportunity. Like even if we fail, it's like I now know how to start a company. I now know how to come up with a random idea, go from like idea conception to, you know, full minimum viable product to actually getting that manufactured, figure out how to do distribution, advertising. So all those types of things are things that we're just learning on the fly.
Yeah.
And so some of the stuff that we've been trying to do is partnering with local card shops, and we do pop-ups there. We also actually set up at gun shows.
I feel like you should set up at farmers markets too, although they may not be your preferred audience.
Like
there's a raw milk crowd too. That's probably also gets it too.
Raw milk terrorists.
I'm just telling you, man. There's a group of people out there that are like the sourdough raw milk ladies are also into this situation. We're slowly radicalizing what used to be kind of lib ladies, and now they're ultra conservative because the Overton window keeps shifting.
Yeah, I also thought of like, even though our game is 17 plus. We did that just because some of the concepts and stuff that we put into it. And, but I did think it would be funny if like some kids had this game in school. Cause I remember being a kid and like having Pokemon cards at school and trading them with my friends, and my teacher wouldn't take them away. Could you imagine being in school and playing with this and then having your teacher see it? And she takes your cards away and she's like, oh, you're making fun of teachers and trannies. And you're like, oh, you know, it's just
it's so good. Yeah. People are going to have to take a look. Can they see examples of what the cards are the way that you've shared them with me on the website?
Yeah. And so we have a couple different products for sale. We have the Conquest Pack, which actually has 2 70 card decks in it.
Okay.
And then we also
so you can sit head to head and play with somebody.
Yeah, you just buy one product. And we also have a sale going on right now with us. Spring 25. We have 25% off on all of our stuff for this spring. There you go. Okay. We got play mats. Oh, that's upside down.
I was going to say, what are we looking at here? Okay, we got kind of a demonic thing. We got 2 different worlds, and then there's all kinds of rules and stuff on there, it looks like, or places where you can actually put your cards.
Yeah, your dice and stuff. Yep.
Okay.
And then we got play mats, and then we also have booster packs. So just like in Pokemon, you got 11 card booster packs. We have boosters. We also have holographics. And then you can also buy holographic singles on our website, and Eric will autograph them too. So we got like Sweat Manderson Scooper.
They look like they'd be really fun gag gifts, even just for people just to laugh, or to put them into a little thing. Like somebody might put a Mickey Mantle card on there. Well, you're not Mickey Mantle, but putting on a baseball card up on your desk. Some of these things have some really, really fun and fun snark to them. The artwork's really good too. So I don't just say that. Like I don't know that I'm going to sit down and play a board game anytime soon, or I'm not going to necessarily play a card game. I'm probably not the audience for that. But the amusement factor of it is very high, and the humor in it is well done. So I thought that was good.
Thank you. Yeah. So I know that, I don't know if you ever talked to Mark Bashaw. He was the guy who was court-martialed by Lieutenant Colonel Vindman.
No, but I could put that on my list of people if you want to put us in touch.
Oh yeah. So, him and I are going to be doing, a game online with the video game. We're going to record it and put it up, and you actually get to see us play it. So, it's fun because we had one to where we have a, William Crosby card, and his special ability is drugging and raping people, and
this is so people understand exactly the sort of humor. It's like, yep, that's what's going on. William
and so
Crosby.
so one time when we were playing, we had a nun out there, and he drugged and raped the nun. I was like, of course he would, you know. And then we had another guy who was getting in character. We have David. You could play as David Duke as a champion because we thought that would be hilarious. And we had a guy who got in character, and he was playing as a racist, so he would only attack the African American cards. I was like, I never even thought of that. I never even thought of getting. I was like, what? It's like, well, we're on the same team. He's like, yeah, but I'm racist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great, and it's even funnier when someone can unlock some sort of technique that's within your own game.
Oh yeah, there's combos like we have another card who's far right. They're trailer trash, and when you destroy the card and put them in shell because they're cooking meth, their trailer blows up and it damages everybody around. So there's we hit everybody, man. We make fun of that. I think people who disagree with me, disagree with my perspective. We try to make a game so that we want those people to play too, because we want people to be able to disassociate with their emotions. And the thing about comedy is the reason why things are funny is because they're true.
Right.
Okay. So you can kind of sneak in there and expose them to some truth. They wouldn't typically emotionally allow themselves to do it, but they can't help but laugh. Like it's
You
like,
could, I mean, you could take a communist and have them play Monopoly and them still get a kick out of getting all the money and putting all the hotels and watching you go bankrupt, right? I mean,
the idea
a game, so
the idea is to take, your people who don't think like you and expose them to ideas in a different way that they've never done.
I love it. I love everything about it. I appreciate you spending the time with me and knocking out 2 hours here. Hope the audience will follow that up. Again, this is kind of a fun, like I said, it happened kind of by happenstance, and who knew how many things. Suppressed 22s is the special secret byline that we had there. So Cameron, I appreciate you joining me, man. That was a fun time to chat about it. Thanks for making me laugh. I had tears coming out of my eyes a couple times. I don't know if it's just maybe I'm either tired, emotional, or you were just hitting right in the spot there. But that was that was appropriately timed. So thanks for having a lighthearted conversation with me, bud.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me, and I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you so much.
Very fun. Pleasure was all mine.
And that is the Sunday sit down for today's Kyle Seraphin show. It is the end of March, so we're going to be going in with some new hold music, and look forward to seeing you guys on this Monday. Give Cameron a look. Check out the website. The links are in the show description. If you guys are interested in the card game, great. If you want to just drop him a line over on X, I'll go ahead and put his profile down there as well. Neat guy, regular dude, another person who's just another, data point along the way of some of the tyranny that we all experienced and why we expect what we expect and what we saw in this country. And I think another person that just hopes to turn it around, just like I do. All right, folks. Thanks for following us. Make sure if you are watching on Spotify, you give us a 5-star review. If you're listening over on Rumble, if you're watching it live or taped, it's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We'd really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up on the video. Same story over on YouTube. You guys know how to do it. Give us a like. It's at Kyle Seraphin on YouTube and on X. You can like the video there if you watched it stream out or if you watched it after the fact. I always pin it to the profile. And then the locals community is at KyleSeraphin.com. If you want to get this a day early, we can do that. We'll make that happen for you. Spotify, easy link if you want to send it to a friend. We'd appreciate it if you did. It's KyleSeraphinShow.com. Just send them that little hyperlink. It'll take them directly to the show, and they can do all the things. Appreciate you. Appreciate you listening. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday or rest of your week. If you listen to this on a long drive, we appreciate you downloading us and taking us with you. God bless you, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank you for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.